Hello everybody, this is Stacia and I'm just a girl on the internet that likes to talk about movies. And this week I will talk about the 1988 movie Who Framed Roger Rabbit. This movie is a little bit different than the rest of my Disney journey because it was done under their Touchstone branch and it is not strictly animated. It is a mixture of live action and animation. And also, besides Touchstone Entertainment, it was co-produced by Amblin Entertainment, which is Steven Spielberg's company. Steven Spielberg is a producer of this movie, and Robert Zemeckis is the director of the movie. This is actually based on a novel that was called Who Censored Roger Rabbit by Gary K. Wolfe. It came out in 1981, and that is the time that Walt Disney actually purchased the rights to the novel. And so this movie, produced by Steven Spielberg, directed by Robert Zemeckis, and I think we all are familiar with Robert Zemeckis, who directed things like Back to the Future, the trilogy, of course, Forrest Gump, which he won Best Director for, Contact, Castaway. He has a list of great movies to his name. And one of those great movies is Who Framed Roger Rabbit. Bob Hoskins is the main star of this movie, playing Eddie Valiant. Well, I shouldn't say the main star because, Roger Rabbit is the main star of the movie, and Roger Rabbit is, of course, animated in this, but is voiced by Charlie Fleischer. Joanna Cassidy is in this, playing Dolores, who is Eddie Valiant's girlfriend. You also have Christopher Lloyd playing Judge Doom in this. Charles Fleischer not only played Roger Rabbit in this, he was the voice of Benny the Cab. And in the Toon Patrol, he was also the voice of Gracie and Psycho. And you have Jessica Rabbit in this, Roger Rabbit's wife. She is voiced, although not credited in the movie, by Kathleen Turner, is the speaking voice, and Amy Irving is the singing voice in this. And Amy Irving at the time was married to Steven Spielberg. But a significant thing of Who Framed Roger Rabbit is it features tunes from not only Disney, but from the WB. So besides the Mickey Mouse and the Donald Duck and all of the Disney type characters, you also have the prominent WB characters like Bugs Bunny and Daffy Duck and Porky Pig. They are all in this movie as well, voiced by Mel Blanc is voicing Bugs Bunny in this movie, Daffy Duck, Porky Pig, Tweety, and Sylvester the Cat. You have all of the classic people that performed, Mickey, Minnie, all doing their tune voices in this movie. And that makes it significant for Who Framed Roger Rabbit that they're all in there together. It even features other characters like Betty Boop is in this movie. Woody Woodpecker. You have appearances by Pinocchio, Dumbo, just a whole world in the Toon world. And if you're not familiar with the storyline of Who Framed Roger Rabbit, it is set in 1947, a sort of alternative 1947 where humans and toons live together. And Eddie Valiant, the private investigator, used to be beloved by toons, did investigating for toons, represented toons, but something happened where he has a grudge against toons. And certain events happen where he is put in the position of having to exonerate Roger Rabbit. Roger Rabbit is a prominent figure in the Toon world and the studio movies that come out of the Toon world. So Roger Rabbit's a huge star of the day. And Roger Rabbit gets falsely accused of murder. And it's up to Eddie Valiant, even though he has certain feelings about toons and helping toons. He is there to try to save the day from Roger Rabbit, who is being hunted by the evil Judge Doom to be put in dip and erased forever. So Disney Studios, who bought the novel in 1981, started working on it, some mock-ups. They did a lot of work between 81 and 83 to try to see if they could get this hybrid live action and animated movie to work. And it's not that it hadn't been done before, and of course has been done since, but they wanted a realistic flow, the characters to interact in a more 3D appearing way, a more visceral experience than what had happened before of these hybrid movies. And at the time, Walt Disney in the 80s, Walt Disney Productions wasn't doing well. And they thought, I believe Jeffrey Katzenberg was in the Disney Corporation at this time, and he thought what the studio needed was the mixed animated live action movie to really save the studio. And I don't think a lot of people nowadays realize how bad Walt Disney Studios was doing at the time. It really needed the hit. And Roger Rabbit did go on to become that hit and really save the studios, and then followed up by The Little Mermaid. Those two movies really set the stage. And then after The Little Mermaid, you have Beauty and the Beast to really encapsulate how successful Walt Disney Productions would become going into the 90s and beyond. Roger Rabbit was the beginning of the setting up for them of that period through their Touchstone Pictures branch, which Touchstone Pictures was more along the lines where they would produce their live action and more adult friendly content. So Walt Disney Studios extended a contract to Steven Spielberg as producer that gave him large creative control over the movie, the right to get the director and really control where Who Framed Roger Rabbit went. It also gave him a large percentage of the profits from the movie. But Disney got to keep all of the merchandising rights. Steven Spielberg was instrumental in getting the rights to use the characters from several other studios. He convinced Warner Brothers, Fleischer Studios, Harvey Comics, King Features Syndicate, Felix the Cat Productions, Turner Entertainment, Universal Pictures, and Walter Lantz Productions into being able to use their characters for this movie, with a lot of stipulations of how they were going to be used, especially the Looney Tunes versus the Disney stuff. There are stipulations where you'll notice if you watch Who Framed Roger Rabbit, a lot of the Disney characters and Warner Brothers characters, they had to have equal screen time. So they, to control that, appear on screen a lot at the same time. But that's as far as their involvement, these other studios' involvement in the production of Who Framed Roger Rabbit goes. I mean, Steven Spielberg was really able to, really negotiate it down so he still had control of everything, but get the permission with, that caveat of screen time. It had to go and how they presented them. They couldn't present any of the characters in a non-flattering light as well. So originally they had given Terry Gilliam the chance to direct this movie, and he found it too technically complicated, and that just wasn't his thing, that he wanted to focus on all of the technical stuff that comes along with making this kind of film. And in 1985, Robert Zemeckis was hired and came on board. So like I said before, Disney had been planning out this movie since the early 80s and did test footage really from 1983 on to see if they could get this to work and some of the technical aspects to work out those kinks. Eddie Valiant in the test footage was played by Peter Renaday, and then an animator, Michael Gabriel, was Eddie Valiant in some of the publicity photographs. Joe Pantoliano actually played Eddie Valiant in a screen test in 1986. Steven Spielberg, on the other hand, would have loved Harrison Ford to play Eddie Valiant, but his price was too high at the time for them to afford Harrison Ford in that role. Also, reportedly, Eddie Murphy turned down the chance to play Eddie Valiant. Bill Murray was also considered for the role. They really, really wanted him to do it and tried to get in touch with him. And even back then, Bill Murray had a sort of weird way of fielding offers and getting in touch with him to field offers for the movie, and they were never able to get a hold of him, so he was never actually given the chance to either accept or reject being in the movie. Ultimately, it would come down to Steven Spielberg choosing Bob Hoskins as the lead role of Eddie Valiant. He liked his acting chops. And Steven Spielberg thought that even though Bob Hoskins' appearance is someone that seems like he would possess the darker side of characters, Steven Spielberg thought Bob Hoskins had a actual hopeful demeanor and really looked like he belonged in the 1940s. And another thing about Who Framed Roger Rabbit, the voice, of course, Charles Fleischer, the iconic voice of Roger Rabbit, but Paul Reubens actually was considered for the role of Roger Rabbit. He even provided Roger Rabbit's voice in some early 1983 test screenings, but ultimately lost out on being Roger Rabbit. Kathleen Turner came on as a suggestion by Robert Zemeckis, who had, of course, worked with her in Romancing the Stone. And her voice gave the Lauren Bacall quality that they were looking for. And Jessica Rabbit's characterization and drawings of Jessica Rabbit herself were inspired by Rita Hayworth, and hair was Veronica Lake. Remember, she's not bad. She's just drawn that way. Tim Curry actually auditioned for the role of Judge Doom, but they ultimately found Tim Curry too terrifying in the role. John Cleese expressed interest in the role but didn't get it. Even Christopher Lee, who's famous for playing Dracula, auditioned for the role and didn't get it. I want to focus on how remarkable at the time Who Framed Roger Rabbit was. It is an all hand-drawn animation movie. CGI did exist in some limitations at the time that the movie was made. It was not ready for this scope of visually complicated type live action and animation things. That wouldn't come until about the mid-90s that it was really ready for that type of all-encompassing parts of the movie. So these are all hand-drawn cells in this movie, and it's used for the hand-drawn cells, and some optical compositing and special cameras were used to really capture that interactive play between the animation and the live action in a way that really hadn't been captured before. So it was really, really remarkable and sort of awe-inspiring to see this movie on the big screen and have those characters interact like that. So Who Framed Roger Rabbit did come out in the Michael Eisner era of Disney, and it is still when Roy Disney was the vice chairman of the Walt Disney Company. And the reason why this isn't a Walt Disney animation presentation, they felt the film was too risque and too many adult themes and sexual references for it to come out under a purely Walt Disney label. And that's why it is in the more adult tone Touchstone picture family. And try as they may to have the movie cut or direct the movie to a more family friendly tone, Robert Zemeckis and Steven Spielberg maintained creative control of the movie. Robert Zemeckis had final cut on the movie as well, so they didn't really have the influence they needed to have it under the Walt Disney banner. So Who Framed Roger Rabbit ends up opening in June of 1988, and it grossed $11.2 million in the opening weekend of release. And that was good enough to have it at the top spot of the box office. And at that time, it was Disney's biggest opening weekend ever. It went on to gross $154 million in just the North American box office and $197.4 million in international releases. The worldwide total of over $350 million. And at the time it was released, it became the 20th highest grossing film of all time. It doesn't hold that spot anymore. So there around the time was the top 3 movies of Who Framed Roger Rabbit, Coming to America, and Rain Man at the time. And the movie that came out on top for the year as the top grossing movie was the movie Rain Man, followed by Who Framed Roger Rabbit, and then Coming to America. 3 still iconic movies. The film would go on to be released on VHS in October of 1989. And of course, DVDs weren't around then. It would be released on DVD in 1999. And critically, Who Framed Roger Rabbit was a big hit too. It earned almost universal praise from most critics. At the Academy Awards, it was up for 6 competitive Oscars and then was presented a Special Achievement Award. But the Oscars that it was nominated for was Best Art Direction, Best Cinematography, Best Film Editing, Best Sound Effects Editing, and Best Visual Effects. And it goes on to garner 4 Academy Awards, that is including the Special Achievement Academy Award. But it did win in the category of Best Film Editing, Best Sound Effects Editing, and Best Visual Effects. And another honor of Who Framed Roger Rabbit is in 2016. It was selected for preservation by the United States National Film Registry, by the Library of Congress, because of its cultural, historical, and aesthetic significance. Now, personally, I saw Who Framed Roger Rabbit when it came out in movie theaters. I was a young teen, and we all found it very enjoyable. It was visually fascinating because of the interplay of the animation and live action. We had all seen, sort of snippets of Disney movies where that interplay happened before, but I can't stress enough, nothing like what you see in this movie. It's also very entertaining. Bob Hoskins is perfect in a role. He does look like he comes from that era. It's just a fun time, and it came at a perfect time for Disney when they really needed it. Because if you're from my era to the Disney era, a lot of live action family films and animated films that were just so. I mean, we enjoyed them when we were kids. They have a special place in our hearts, but it wasn't the Disney of the 30s and 40s and 50s where they were all huge successes. They were all kind of just at that time lackluster, especially the animated movies that Disney was putting out at that time. The Roger Rabbit came at just the right time for them. And like I said, that garnered in the period where after that you had The Little Mermaid. After that you had Beauty and the Beast. And Beauty and the Beast is probably the most significant because of its Best Picture nomination and for an animated film that had never happened before. And that kind of also led to the category of Best Animated Feature at the Academy Awards. So I can't stress enough what a good, fun movie Who Framed Roger Rabbit is. If you are looking for a lighthearted good time with great acting in it, great effects where it seamlessly blends everything, where you don't even realize at one point, that these are an animated character and the live action characters together. They look like they interplay so seamlessly that you don't even notice that Bob Hoskins was playing against nothing, basically. His performance is pitch perfect in this movie. He really carries the movie from beginning to end, along with the other mayhem happening around him. And Christopher Lloyd as Judge Doom is the fine balance of a fine, menacing character that is not too menacing that it is off-putting to younger audiences that are, the 6, 7, 8 year olds that also inevitably at the time watched this movie, because that's just what happened at that time. You watched a little bit of movies that were just a tad bit inappropriate for you. But if you live in a world where you haven't seen Who Framed Roger Rabbit, and admittedly, I hadn't seen it in years before I watched it before doing this video, and I found it just as enjoyable to watch today as when I first watched it when it first came out in the movie theaters when I was a young teenage Stacia. It was delightful to watch today, still fun to watch, still probably since it's set in the 1940s, I didn't have to pretend that it was still relevant for today. Its setting, even back in the 80s, takes it to another period. I didn't even have to think of it as like a period piece to get it in my mind that, this is not a modern day picture. And I have to say, does it seem like the Walt Disney Corporation doesn't show respect to the movie Who Framed Roger Rabbit? Because I think they should make it more of a center point. I know it used to be more featured in the Disney parks back in the day, but I think Disney itself needs to lend more respect to this movie, because I believe without Who Framed Roger Rabbit, Disney might have died decades ago. So I just think they need to, honor its legacy for what it really did for the studio. I don't know if this wasn't such a big hit and did get shot in the arm that Disney needed at the time, would they have been able to do The Little Mermaid? Would The Little Mermaid, if they were able to do it, have been such a big hit because this sort of garnered, more attention, more focus on what Disney could put out? I don't know. Maybe it still would have, maybe The Little Mermaid would have been that big hit that brought. But I would just like to see the Walt Disney Corporation, even though you can watch it on Disney Plus, it's still available. It's not like it's totally removed from the park, but I just don't see Disney focusing on the legacy of this movie. Maybe they think of it more as a Steven Spielberg, Robert Zemeckis film than their own. Maybe it's because it features so many animated characters from several different studios. But I think Disney owes a debt of gratitude to the movie Who Framed Roger Rabbit. Tell me if you agree with me or not. Or if you haven't seen Who Framed Roger Rabbit, I implore you to watch this just endlessly entertaining and fun movie. But thank you for joining me. My name is Stacia, and like I said, I'm just a girl on the internet that likes to talk about movies. And if you like movies as much as I do, consider subscribing to the channel. Don't forget to hit the like button, and don't forget to comment. I love responding to all of your comments, whether good or bad. But thank you for joining me. I love you all. Bye.